"You stepped on my dress." Rachel, the tourist, shrieked, her voice harsh enough to make the entire restaurant turn in her direction. The laughter from other tables quieted. I'm so sorry." Jessica, the waitress, stammered, instinctively reaching out to apologize, but Rachel wasn't having it. "This dress could buy your future." Rachel sneered, standing up, the anger radiating off her. She looked down at Jessica with a contemptuous smirk. "What are you even doing here, working for tips like some lowly servant? You don't deserve to even be in this place." Before anyone could blink, the loud noise of the slap echoed through the air. What happened next is unbelievable. As we dive into the story, if you believe everyone should be treated with respect, then tell us in the comment where you're watching from and click the subscribe button now to enjoy this story. The restaurant was bustling as usual, the type of place where the city's elite came to dine, well-dressed businessmen, couples celebrating anniversaries, and tourists seeking a taste of luxury. The staff, a team of hardworking individuals, moved seamlessly between tables, their every action calculated to ensure the guests' experience was perfect. Jessica, the young black woman in her mid-20s, was part of that team. She had worked at this upscale restaurant for several months now, using every shift to save money for college. She was a hard worker, reliable and composed, with dreams of something bigger. She had big plans for her future, and this job, though demanding, was a stepping stone. For Jessica, the restaurant was just that, a place to work, earn, and move forward. She'd never felt out of place. But tonight, that was about to change. Jessica wasn't just another waitress. She was proud of the work she did, knowing it was a part of her journey toward her future. She was the cousin of the restaurant owner, someone who had been raised with a sense of responsibility and dignity. But despite her inner strength, tonight, she was about to face something she hadn't experienced before. Blatant disrespect. Rachel's glare as Jessica approached her table wasn't subtle. There was no mistaking the way Rachel looked at her, like she was a servant who had crossed the line. Jessica felt it in the pit of her stomach, but she wasn't the type to back down. She kept her composure and smiled, moving forward with her usual professional ease. Rachel was everything Jessica wasn't: wealthy, entitled, and arrogantly unaware of how her actions affected others. She sat at the table with her friends, laughing, talking, and drinking wine. But when Jessica approached to serve her, Rachel's mood shifted. Rachel's eyes narrowed slightly, and her tone changed. The polite request turned into something more cutting, something that made Jessica pause. There was a noticeable difference in the way Rachel treated her compared to the other staff. It was the first time Jessica was experiencing this level of open hostility, just because of who she was. It wasn't subtle. It was there in Rachel's every word, her every glance. And Jessica, for the first time, felt it. Sitting at the table next to Rachel was Sean, another tourist who wasn't blind to what was happening. Sean was observant. He wasn't a part of Rachel's entitled world, but he understood people. When he saw how Rachel treated Jessica, it made him uncomfortable. He noticed the dismissive glances, the subtle comments at Jessica's work, and his gut told him it wasn't just about bad service. It was something deeper, something that Jessica couldn't ignore. When Rachel's behavior became more toxic, Sean couldn't stay silent. He tried to speak up. "Hey there, you don't need to treat her like that," Sean said, his voice low but firm. But Rachel, without missing a beat, shot back. "Mind your business. I'll treat her however I like." Kylie, a social media influencer, watched with great curiosity. She always had her eyes scanning, ready for news she would use to feed her followers. Jessica reached Rachel's table, ready to place down their orders. Jessica set the drink down, her movements graceful, but Rachel's impatience was palpable. "You know, I've been sitting here for 20 minutes, and you've hardly even looked at my table," Rachel snapped, her tone sharp, cutting through the air. "I'm sorry for the delay, ma'am," Jessica replied, forcing a smile. "Why is she acting so rude?" Emily's son asked. Emily and her 2 kids were sitting at the rear end of the restaurant. They had come to have a nice family bonding time. "Mom, you said that's not the right way to treat people," her daughter replied with a curious gaze in her eyes. "I know, my darlings. Her attitude is really wrong," Emily replied with a look of bewilderment on her face. Rachel wasn't finished. "It's not about the delay, it's about your attitude. You don't seem to care about your job. How long have you been working here? 2 weeks? You should know how to serve by now, she sneered. The tension in the air was thick. Rachel, having already made her rude comments, wasn't satisfied. She had set her sights on Jessica, the young waitress, and it seemed nothing would make her stop. Every small mistake was an opportunity for Rachel to tear her down, and Jessica, though she held herself with grace and patience, could feel the weight of the insults starting to add up. Rachel looked at her drink, her fingers tapping the rim of the glass as if waiting for Jessica to make a misstep. "You know," Rachel began, her voice dripping with superiority, "it's not hard to get a drink right. You should really focus a little more." She glanced up at Jessica as if the words were casual, but the tone was sharp, biting. Jessica stayed silent, offering a quick apology, trying to stay professional, but her patience was quickly being tested. She knew that people like Rachel expected perfection, even when they weren't giving any respect in return. Rachel wasn't finished, of course. She continued her rude remarks at Jessica, pointing out every minor issue, from the temperature of the wine to the speed of Jessica's movements. Each comment cut deeper, but Jessica, trying to keep her emotions in check, kept moving between tables. She wasn't going to let Rachel ruin her night, especially not when she was so close to her goal of saving for college. But fate had a way of making things inevitable. Jessica reached Rachel's table to clear away the empty glasses and plates, moving carefully to avoid any mishaps. But in her haste to make sure Rachel's table was properly cleaned, Jessica accidentally stepped on the hem of Rachel's expensive dress. The sound of fabric ripping underfoot echoed across the table, and Rachel's eyes shot up, immediately filled with fury. "You stepped on my dress?" Rachel shrieked, her voice harsh enough to make the entire restaurant turn in her direction. The laughter from other tables quieted. I'm so sorry," Jessica stammered, instinctively reaching out to apologize, but Rachel wasn't having it. She slapped her on the face, cursing under her breath. "This dress could buy your future?" Rachel sneered, standing up, the anger radiating off her. She looked down at Jessica with a contemptuous smirk. "What are you even doing here, working for tips like some lowly servant? You don't deserve to even be in this place." The words stung, but Jessica wasn't one to let them break her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves, but she could feel her hands shaking. The insult wasn't just about the dress. It was about who Rachel thought she was, and how little respect she had for the people serving her. At that moment, Jessica's patience snapped. The thought of holding her tongue suddenly didn't feel like the right choice. She wasn't going to stand there and take this. Not anymore. Without thinking twice, Jessica lifted her hand and slapped Rachel back, hard, across the face. The sound of the slap rang through the room, louder than the clinking of glasses, sharper than any voice. The restaurant, once filled with quiet murmurs, now fell into complete silence. Jessica stood still, her chest heaving with the adrenaline of the moment, while Rachel staggered back in shock, her hand flying to her cheek. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Rachel's eyes were wide, her face flushed with embarrassment and disbelief. The other patrons sat in stunned silence, unsure of what to do. But Jessica, calm and steady, looked Rachel straight in the eye and spoke the words that would forever change the course of the night. "I won't be treated that way. Not by anyone. Not even you," Jessica said, her voice unwavering, each word filled with the strength of someone who had finally taken control of their narrative. "What would you do if you were Jessica? Would you stand up for yourself or walk away? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this." The room's tension hung in the air like smoke, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. But the silence was soon broken by Sean, the tourist sitting at the neighboring table. Sean, a man in his mid-30s, had been watching the exchange from the corner of his eye. He had noticed Rachel's rude behavior and confronted it, but she had shut him down. "Hey, you don't get to treat people like that," Sean said, his voice loud enough for Rachel to hear, but not aggressive. He stood up, his eyes narrowing as he faced Rachel. "She was just doing her job. You can't just walk all over people because you think you're better than them. I don't understand why you slapped her. I am sure you weren't expecting her to reciprocate." "Not everyone can be controlled by the likes of you," he said. Rachel, her face still burning from the slap, shot Sean a glare. "Mind your business," she hissed, her voice cutting through the air. "You don't know anything about me." Sean's expression remained firm. "I know enough. And what I see is someone who's too used to getting everything handed to them and never having to face the consequences of their actions." Rachel took a deep breath, her pride refusing to let her back down. "Stay out of it, or I'll have you kicked out of here too." She was rattled, but her arrogance still blazed. Sean simply shook his head, disappointed, and sat back down. He wasn't going to fight her. It was clear Rachel didn't care to listen. Meanwhile, Kylie, sitting at another table, had been watching the scene unfold and had already reached for her phone. Her fingers flew across the screen as she tweeted about the event. "A tourist just slapped a waitress. This is the kind of behavior we should not tolerate. Rude tourists, justice for Jessica." Kylie's tweet caught fire almost instantly. Within minutes, it had been shared by dozens, then hundreds of people. Replies flooded in, many people expressing their shock and disgust at Rachel's actions. What started as a minor interaction was now a viral moment, and Jessica's story was spreading far and wide. Over at the rear table, Emily, a mother dining with her children, who had been quietly observing the drama, looked with shock. She could see the confused look on her children's face, who had felt uncomfortable with Rachel's behavior before, and decided it was time for a lesson. Though she didn't say anything directly to them, she just made a simple but important comment. "Sometimes, people think they can treat others badly, just because they can. But that's not right. And no matter who you are, you can always stand up for yourself. Always." Rachel, now livid, stormed into the restaurant's office, demanding to see the manager. Her voice was sharp, and her every step was fueled by frustration. Mr. Brownstone, the manager, a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor, stood up as soon as he saw her enter. He had seen many guests like Rachel before, guests who thought their money gave them the right to act however they wanted. "I want to speak to the person in charge," Rachel snapped, her tone demanding. "This restaurant's standards are a joke. You need to deal with the staff and how I was treated." Mr. Brownstone stood his ground, his expression neutral. He didn't flinch. "I'm the manager here, ma'am. How can I assist you?" "I want that girl fired, and I want her to pay for what she did," Rachel hissed, her face red with rage. "She slapped me in front of all those people. Do you have any idea who I am?" Mr. Brownstone nodded slowly. "I'm aware of the situation, ma'am, but I think you'll find that Jessica, the waitress, has a connection to the restaurant that you might not know about." Rachel raised an eyebrow, her anger momentarily quelling in the face of curiosity. "What are you talking about?" "Jessica," Mr. Brownstone said calmly, "is the cousin of the owner of this restaurant. And not just this restaurant, she's involved in other businesses as well, a very successful family." Rachel froze, her mind racing, as the truth began to sink in. She had thought Jessica was just a lowly waitress, someone she could treat however she pleased. But now, everything was changing. Jessica wasn't just any employee, she was family to someone powerful. "What did you say?" Rachel asked, her voice growing quieter, more dangerous. "The owner is her cousin?" "Yes, ma'am," Mr. Brownstone replied, his tone firm but respectful. "You'll find that we take our staff and our guests' experiences seriously, and we stand by our people, especially someone like Jessica. She's not working here because she's from a poor family. She wants to take an independent step by paying her first college tuition." Rachel's face reddened even more, the realization dawning on her. She had just slapped the cousin of the restaurant's owner, and her actions were about to have consequences far beyond the slap itself. Knowing she couldn't have her fired, she walked angrily out of the manager's office, slamming the door. Angry, humiliated, and feeling defeated, Rachel turned on her heel, out of the restaurant. She hadn't gotten her way, but she wasn't the type to back down. She would deal with Jessica. She would make sure Jessica paid for what happened. As she walked out of the restaurant, Rachel made a silent vow to herself. She would make Jessica's life miserable. She would take this to the courts and destroy her. After all, she wasn't just going to let a waitress get away with humiliating her in front of everyone. Jessica's calm, defiant words echoed in her mind. "I won't be treated that way. Not by anyone. Not even you." Rachel's pride was wounded, but what hurt the most was the fact that she had been shown up, humiliated in a way she couldn't accept. As she left, her thoughts spun into a whirlwind of retaliation. She wasn't going to let Jessica get away with this. No, she would take action. She would make Jessica pay for what had happened, for daring to slap her in front of so many people. Her wealth and connections had always given her an advantage in life, and she was certain they would work in her favor now. Rachel knew exactly what to do. She decided to sue Jessica for harassment, claiming that Jessica had instigated the physical confrontation. She was going to play the victim, spin the narrative that Jessica had attacked her for no reason, and use her money and influence to push her story. She wasn't going to let some waitress stand in the way of her pride. Days later, the case went to court. Rachel had filed her lawsuit, claiming that Jessica had harassed her by slapping her for no reason. She painted herself as the victim. Poor Rachel. Just a tourist enjoying a night out, only to be attacked by a waitress with a bad attitude. But what Rachel didn't know was that Sean's father, a respected judge known for his fairness and integrity, had been assigned to oversee her case. Rachel had no idea who Sean was, but Sean had quietly told his father everything that had happened that night. He had shared the details of the incident, told him about the situation in the restaurant, and described what Rachel had done. Sean's father had heard it all. When Rachel entered the courtroom, her sense of superiority was still intact. She assumed her wealth and status would make the case go her way. She was confident. But as the trial began, she saw Sean's father step onto the bench. She instantly recognized Sean, who had a striking resemblance with the judge. Wait, this is Sean's father? Rachel thought, her stomach sinking. The reality of the situation hit her like a ton of bricks. Sean's father, a man of strong moral principles, was not someone who could be easily swayed. He was known for his integrity, and he had already heard both sides of the story. His expression was calm but resolute as he addressed the courtroom. Rachel, I've reviewed the evidence thoroughly. You have claimed that you were attacked for no reason, but your story is filled with inconsistencies, the judge began, his voice firm but not unkind. Rachel's face turned pale as Sean's father continued, breaking down her false claims one by one. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom as he exposed the holes in Rachel's story. It is clear from the evidence that Jessica acted in defense, and your accusations of harassment are without merit. Rachel's heart pounded as she tried to maintain her composure. She hadn't expected things to go this way, not when she had everything stacked in her favor. Furthermore, I've learned that you have been falsifying details about Jessica's character, spreading defamatory claims that have no basis in reality. The judge continued, his tone growing even more serious. You will be held accountable for your actions. Rachel opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She was stunned. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had thought her wealth and connections would protect her, but now she was facing consequences for her lies. What do you think should happen to Raquel? Should she be let off or made sure to face the consequences of her actions? Share your thoughts in the comments and click on the like and subscribe button now if you have not. The courtroom was filled with a tense silence, the weight of what was about to happen hanging in the air. Rachel, sitting at the defendant's table, clenched her fists tightly, the realization of her impending defeat slowly sinking in. She had thought her wealth, her connections would be her shield, but now she was facing the reality that the scales of justice had tipped against her. She was about to be held accountable for her actions. For the past few weeks, Rachel had been adamant that she was in the right. She had convinced herself that her wealth and status entitled her to special treatment. But now, with the judge's gavel about to fall, the truth was unavoidable. Judge Martin sat at the bench, his expression unreadable. He had listened carefully to every word spoken, every piece of evidence presented. And now, after days of deliberation, it was time for him to make his decision. Rachel, once so confident, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The glare from her attorney was not enough to ease the sinking feeling in her stomach. Plot twist. The judge invites witnesses to the stand. The courtroom had fallen silent once again, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. After hearing the arguments from both sides, the judge, known for his careful deliberation and fair rulings, leaned forward in his chair, his voice cutting through the stillness. Before I make my final ruling, I believe it's important to hear from those who were present during this incident. Rachel's stomach tightened. She hadn't expected this. In her mind, the case had been simple. She was the victim, and Jessica's behavior had been unjustifiable. But now, as the judge called for witnesses, a sense of dread crept in. She could feel the eyes of the courtroom turning toward her, some with curiosity, others with judgment. We will now hear from witnesses who were present that evening at the restaurant. Let them testify to what they saw and heard during the altercation between the defendant and the plaintiff. The judge gestured toward the door. Slowly, Sean, Kylie, Emily, and even Jessica's cousin, the owner of the restaurant, stepped forward, one by one. The weight of their testimonies, each coming from a different perspective, was about to change everything. The first to speak was Sean, the tourist who had been sitting at the nearby table when Rachel and Jessica's confrontation began. He stood confidently, his gaze unwavering, as he made his way to the stand. Rachel's heart raced as she watched him approach. Sean's voice, calm and measured, rang out clearly in the courtroom. I was at the restaurant that night, sitting just a few feet away from the defendant and the plaintiff. I witnessed the entire exchange. Sean's eyes briefly glanced at Rachel, and then he continued, his tone firm but respectful. I saw Rachel belittle Jessica the moment she walked up to the table. There was no reason for her to treat Jessica with such disrespect. When Jessica accidentally stepped on her dress, Rachel exploded. I saw the slap from Rachel's hand hit Jessica's face first. It was loud, aggressive, and completely unprovoked. Sean paused, letting his words sink in. Then Jessica slapped her back. I was shocked, but I understood why. Nobody deserves to be treated that way. Not in front of others, not in a public place. Jessica stood up for herself, and she had every right to do so. Rachel's face flushed with humiliation as Sean's testimony became a turning point. He had witnessed it all, and his account was clear and unwavering. Next, Kylie, the woman who had tweeted about the incident in real time, stepped up to the witness stand. Her phone had captured the moment, and now, the world was about to hear what she had witnessed firsthand. Kylie was calm, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen something unjust. I was sitting at a table across from the defendant and the plaintiff. I could see the tension between them, and it was clear to me that Rachel had a bad attitude from the beginning. Kylie's voice was steady, though her words cut deep. When Jessica accidentally stepped on Rachel's dress, I saw Rachel lose control. She slapped Jessica hard across the face. It was uncalled for, and it was shocking. I felt uncomfortable being there, watching it happen. Kylie glanced briefly at Rachel before continuing. I knew I had to say something, so I tweeted about it. I felt that people needed to know what was happening, and I couldn't just stay silent. The words stung Rachel like ice, and the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Kylie's testimony added another layer to the story, showing how the event had impacted others, and highlighting Rachel's unchecked behavior. Then, Emily, the mother who had been dining with her children, took the stand. She appeared calm, but there was an intensity to her gaze as she recounted what had happened that evening. I was with my 2 children at a table not far from the defendant and the plaintiff. We had just finished eating when we witnessed the entire altercation. I saw Rachel raise her voice and insult Jessica without any provocation. Emily's voice trembled slightly, but she stood firm. When Rachel slapped Jessica, I saw the shock on Jessica's face. She wasn't the aggressor. Rachel had already pushed her to the point where she had no choice but to stand up for herself. I looked at my children, and I could see the confusion in their eyes. They didn't understand why someone would treat another person that way. I had to teach them a lesson about respect. Emily turned to face the judge. No one deserves to be disrespected like that, especially not in front of others. Jessica was forced into a position where she had to defend herself, and I'm proud that she did. Finally, Jessica's cousin, the owner of the restaurant, took the stand. He had been watching the proceedings from the back, but now, as the judge called on him, it was his turn to speak. I own the restaurant where this incident occurred, and I've worked closely with Jessica for a long time. She's always shown incredible professionalism, even in the face of difficult customers. Jessica's cousin's voice was steady, and his words carried the weight of authority. When I heard about what happened that night, I was appalled. Jessica has always conducted herself with grace, and for someone to treat her the way Rachel did is unacceptable. I'm proud of her for standing up for herself. She did nothing wrong. His words hung in the air, emphasizing the support Jessica had from her family and colleagues. The truth was becoming undeniable, and Rachel couldn't escape the reality of her actions. As each witness shared their testimony, the weight of Rachel's actions became clearer. She felt isolated in the courtroom, the walls closing in around her. The people who had once supported her were now speaking out against her behavior. The public backlash had already begun to take a toll, and now, in this moment of reckoning, Rachel had nowhere to hide. She had come into the courtroom thinking she could control the narrative, using her wealth and privilege to silence others. But now, she was facing the consequences. She was no longer the powerful woman who could get whatever she wanted. She was just a woman who had mistreated someone who didn't deserve it. And the world was watching. Judge Martin steadied his gaze as he gave his judgment. After reviewing all the evidence presented in this case, I find that the defendant, Rachel, has not only falsely accused Jessica of harassment, but she has also engaged in the act of defamation. Rachel's heart dropped. The words felt like a punch to the gut. Defamation. It was the label she never thought she'd wear. She was about to realize the true cost of her actions. Furthermore, it has become clear that the defendant fabricated details about Jessica's behavior and character in order to justify her own misconduct. The judge's voice was steady, resolute. This court does not tolerate such dishonesty, especially when it leads to the unjust harm of another person. Rachel's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. Her attempt to retaliate had not only failed, but it had backfired. Instead of restoring her pride, it had shattered it. She had been so sure she could win, so confident that her status would make everything fall in her favor. But now, the law was on Jessica's side. The judge continued, "As a result, I hereby fine the defendant an additional sum for defamation of character, in addition to the settlement that will be awarded to the plaintiff Jessica. The amount will be substantial, considering the damage done to her reputation." Rachel's face was drained of color. Her mind raced. This wasn't supposed to happen. The fine, which was far greater than she had ever anticipated, was a harsh blow to her sense of control. This wasn't just a monetary loss, it was a public defeat, one that would echo through her career. In addition, Rachel's employer, the agency she works for, has been notified of these actions. They will be made aware of the extent to which their employee has behaved dishonestly. The judge's words hung heavily in the air. "You will also face repercussions at your place of employment." Rachel's stomach twisted. The shame of knowing her agency would now see her for what she truly was, a liar, a manipulator, was too much to bear. Her sense of superiority, built over years of wealth and privilege, was crumbling before her eyes. As the judge's final words echoed through the courtroom, Rachel felt a deep, hollow sensation in the pit of her stomach. The courtroom, once buzzing with whispers and anticipation, now held a heavy silence. Her lawyer's attempts to argue in her defense had been futile, and all she could do was sit there, facing the cold reality of her actions. Rachel glanced at the crowd, the same crowd that had witnessed her humiliation at the restaurant. Some of them, the ones who had seen her belittle Jessica, now looked at her with a mix of judgment and pity. The judge's ruling wasn't just a legal victory for Jessica. It was a personal defeat for Rachel. She had been forced to confront the truth, something she had avoided her entire life. She wasn't above the law, and her money couldn't shield her from the consequences of her actions. Her body felt heavy as she stood up, the weight of her disgrace pressing down on her shoulders. The whispers of the courtroom seemed to follow her as she walked out, her head held low in defeat. Her pride, once unshakable, was now shattered, and Rachel knew there was no escaping the consequences. As the courtroom continued to buzz with murmurs, Jessica sat quietly, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The moment the judge had pronounced his ruling, a wave of relief washed over her. She had stood up for herself, and now justice had been served. But it wasn't just about the ruling, it was about the support she had received along the way. Throughout the trial, Jessica had been nervous. She had faced Rachel's accusations with strength, but it hadn't been easy. Yet, the moment the judge ruled in her favor, the tide had turned. It wasn't just about the money or the fine, it was about the message sent. You cannot treat people like that, and there will be consequences. But Jessica wasn't alone in this. The support she had received from the people around her, from Sean, who had spoken up for her, to the community that had backed her on social media, had played a significant role. In the courtroom, her colleagues from the restaurant had shown their support as well. They stood behind her, proud of her courage to face such a powerful adversary. Jessica could feel their support, a silent affirmation that she had done the right thing. The courage to stand up against Rachel's privilege and entitlement wasn't just Jessica's fight. It was a fight for anyone who had ever been belittled or mistreated. And now, as the courtroom quieted and the judge's gavel fell, Jessica could finally exhale. She had fought for herself, and in doing so, she had inspired others to do the same. This was just the beginning of Jessica's journey. Her courage to stand up for herself had set a precedent, and Rachel's downfall was a reminder that no one is above the law, no matter how powerful they think they are. The days following the trial were a whirlwind for Jessica. News of her legal victory quickly spread, and while the courtroom drama was over, the ripple effects were just beginning. The weight of what had transpired sank in as she stood in front of the restaurant, looking up at the large windows, feeling a sense of accomplishment she had never imagined. Jessica had returned to work a few days after the trial. She walked through the doors with a renewed sense of pride, carrying the weight of her victory in her posture. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was someone who had stood up for herself when no one else would. The past few weeks had tested her in ways she never expected, but now, standing tall and confident, she knew that the battle had been worth it. Her cousin, the restaurant owner, greeted her warmly when she walked into the back office. "You did great, Jessica. You handled the whole thing with grace and integrity." He smiled, a proud gleam in his eyes. "You showed everyone that no matter who you are, no one should ever disrespect you like that. You stood your ground, and you did it right." Jessica smiled, feeling a deep sense of relief wash over her. It had been a difficult journey, and there had been moments when she doubted herself. But hearing her cousin's praise reminded her of the strength she didn't even know she had. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice steady. "I couldn't have done it without the support I had. It wasn't just about me. It was about proving that we all deserve respect, no matter our job or our background." Her cousin nodded in agreement. "You're absolutely right, and you've set an example for everyone here. You've shown them that standing up for what's right is always the right choice." Jessica couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. Her heart swelled with pride as she thought back on the courtroom, the judge's ruling, and how everything had changed. For the first time in her life, she realized that her voice mattered, and standing up for herself had created a ripple effect far beyond that one courtroom. While Jessica's life was on the up and up, Rachel's world was beginning to fall apart. Her arrogance had cost her dearly. The defamation case had not only damaged her reputation, but had now set off a series of consequences that Rachel had not seen coming. As the news of Rachel's actions spread, her agency took swift action. Her once glowing career began to crumble as more people learned about her dishonesty. Her employer, the agency she had worked for so long, officially distanced itself from her. A public statement was made distancing themselves from Rachel's actions and her behavior toward Jessica. Rachel's pride had been the very thing that led to her downfall. For so long, she had relied on her wealth and influence to get her way, to shield her from the consequences of her actions. But now, the consequences were catching up to her, and there was no escaping the public fallout. Her once thriving career began to suffer, and her social media accounts, once filled with praise and admiration, became flooded with negative comments and backlash. The humiliating incident at the restaurant became the talk of the town, and Rachel found herself in a whirlwind of regret, her world slowly crumbling around her. As she tried to save her reputation, it became clear that the damage was too extensive. Rachel's career, built on a foundation of arrogance and entitlement, was now at risk of falling apart completely. She had tried to use her power, her wealth, and her influence to push others down. But in the end, it was her own actions that destroyed her. Rachel's friends, initially silent, start receiving criticism from their own social circles for associating with her. They face pressure to denounce her actions publicly. Some friends issue statements distancing themselves from Rachel, while others choose to cut ties completely. Feeling betrayed and isolated, Rachel confronts her friends, seeking understanding and support. However, they express disappointment in her behavior and the negative impact it has had on their reputations. The public scandal, the lawsuit, and the loss of her career made her spend months trying to rebuild her life. Her reputation was in tatters, and her once glowing career was nothing but a distant memory. She had retreated from the public eye, trying to lick her wounds in private, but her drive to regain her former status remained relentless. Determined to get back into the elite social circles that had once adored her, Rachel received an invitation to one of the most exclusive parties of the year. It was hosted by Eliza Kensington, a business mogul with connections that could open any door in the world. For Rachel, this was her chance to reclaim her place in the world, to prove that she was still the powerful, influential woman she once was. Rachel pulled out all the stops. She wore a sleek, black designer dress, her makeup flawless, and her confidence, at least on the outside, unshaken. As she arrived at the glamorous mansion where the party was being held, she could almost feel the weight of her past mistakes. But tonight, she told herself it would all be different. This was her comeback. She walked into the party with a smile, immediately scanning the room for potential connections. The guests were the who's who of the social elite: billionaires, politicians, socialites, and people with enough power to make things happen. Rachel immediately set her sights on Eliza, the hostess, who was deep in conversation with a few of the most influential people in the room. Rachel wasn't one to waste time. She approached with all the poise and charm she could muster. But then, something unexpected happened. Just as Rachel was about to make her way to Eliza, she was stopped by Victoria Foster, a woman who had been making waves in the business world and was known for her ruthless tactics. Victoria was in her late 40s, sharp, intimidating, and unapologetically wealthy. She was also notorious for not suffering fools, and Rachel, in her current state, was seen as nothing more than a fool. Victoria looked Rachel up and down with a cold, calculating gaze before speaking. "You're Rachel, right? The one who slapped a waitress in public and ruined your entire career?" Her words were laced with mockery, her tone sharp enough to cut through the laughter and music in the background. Rachel's stomach tightened. The insult was swift and unforgiving, but she tried to keep her composure, smiling stiffly. Yes, I am Rachel, but that's behind me now." Victoria didn't seem impressed. She smirked and leaned in closer. "Oh, darling, it's never really behind you, is it? Once you lose your reputation, it's gone for good. You can try all you want to cling to this charade, but people like me, we can see right through you." Rachel's heart raced. She hadn't expected to be on the receiving end of such harsh treatment at a party where she was trying to reconnect with powerful people. But Victoria wasn't finished. "You know, I really don't understand people like you," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "You think you can just get away with everything because you have money or connections. You tried to crush someone beneath you, and now look at you. You're nothing but a laughing stock." Victoria turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Rachel standing there, stunned and humiliated. The conversation had felt like a slap in the face, but it wasn't the kind of slap Rachel was used to. It was a slap that left her raw and exposed. As the night dragged on, Rachel tried to shake off the encounter. She moved from one group to another, trying to play the game, trying to network and impress the right people. But everywhere she went, she felt like an outsider. People didn't look at her with admiration anymore. Instead, they either ignored her or, like Victoria, treated her with condescension. It was then that Rachel truly understood what she had done, how far she had fallen, how her privilege had led her to treat others with disdain, and how easily it could be taken away. She had mistreated Jessica, a waitress just trying to make a living, and now she was being humiliated by someone who was richer and more powerful than she could ever hope to be. Rachel stood alone near the balcony, looking out over the glittering city lights. Her reflection in the glass seemed foreign to her. Who had she become? She thought back to the incident with Jessica. The way she had slapped her, the way she had felt so superior, so untouchable. Now, all of that felt like a distant memory, a mistake she couldn't undo. But something had changed inside Rachel that night. For the first time, she truly felt the weight of her actions. She realized that the world didn't revolve around her, that power and privilege didn't give her the right to treat people however she wanted. The truth was clear. Her actions had consequences, and she couldn't run from them anymore. For Jessica, things kept getting better. The settlement money she had received helped ease her financial burden, but there was something even bigger on the horizon, something that would change the course of her future forever. It was a regular Tuesday when Jessica received a letter that would forever alter her life. Her heart raced as she tore open the envelope, her hands shaking. It was from the prestigious university she had always dreamed of attending. A university she had worked tirelessly for, with the goal of securing a place among the brightest students. As she read the letter aloud to herself, her voice caught in her throat. Dear Miss Jessica Scott, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to the prestigious Oxford University. Your academic achievements, character, and resilience have impressed our admissions committee, and we believe you will be a valuable addition to our community. Jessica's eyes welled up with tears. After everything she had been through, facing disrespect, standing up for herself, enduring the backlash, this was the moment she had been waiting for. The university didn't just recognize her academic potential. They saw the strength she had shown in the face of adversity. They saw someone who wasn't afraid to stand up for herself, someone with unwavering integrity, and someone who, despite the odds, had proven herself capable of achieving great things. It meant that her dreams were not just possible, they were within reach. The university offered her a full scholarship, an acknowledgement not only of her academic skills but also of her personal growth and perseverance. They were pleased with her. Jessica, still excited, went online and began to type a message she wanted to share with the world. Her confrontation with Rachel wasn't just a tale of personal victory and defeat. It was a reflection on the larger message about standing up for what's right, the importance of integrity, and the consequences of misusing power. No matter who you are, you have the right to be treated with respect. No amount of money, privilege, or status should give anyone the power to belittle another person. Rachel had misused her power, thinking her wealth and status would protect her from the consequences of her actions. But in the end, it was Rachel's inability to see people as equals that led to her downfall. Jessica's reflection, now that she had gained perspective, was powerful. She realized that standing up for herself wasn't just about winning the case. It was about showing others that respect and accountability should never be optional. She knew that she had done the right thing, no matter how hard it had been. The victory wasn't just legal, it was moral. Jessica's story became a testament to the power of self-respect. She stood tall because she knew her worth, and no one, no matter their background, had the right to treat her as less than human. For herself had not only changed her life, it had inspired others to do the same. Her victory wasn't just about the court ruling, the settlement, or even the fine Rachel had to pay. It was about the power of standing up for what was right, no matter the consequences. Do you think Rachel got what she deserved? Should she have been fined more? Let us know in the comments below. If you believe in standing up for what's right, no matter who you are, hit that like button. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one.